Welcome, listeners. You are here for an episode of Mind Power Meets Mystic. I am Michelle Walters. I am the Mind Power part of our title. Our show mystic, Cynthia Varkevisser, is off doing other stuff today. She is our show mystic, and she won't be here today, but she'll be back probably next week. I am joined today by Eloise Hill. Eloise has been on our show before, at least once, and she is a local healer. She's a medical intuitive. She's an author like me, and she's one of the show's dear friends. We invited Eloise to be on our show today because Eloise is a practitioner of Samhain, which is the upcoming pagan holiday at the end of October. And I don't know much about it, but it sounds pretty cool. And so I thought that it would be fun to talk to Eloise to learn a little bit more about Samhain and where it comes from, what it's all about, kind of what do you need to know about it? So Eloise, tell us about Samhain.
Hello, hello. Thank you for having me on your show. I'm delighted to be here once again. So I am Wiccan, and as a result, I do celebrate all of the Sabbats of the Wheel of the Year, and we'll talk about that in a minute. Samhain is right at the top. It is the one that has survived all attempts to stomp it out by the Catholic Church, and in some form, it still remains in the practices that we do at Halloween. I'm going to just get started with a couple bullet points here and talk about a few things. And if that's okay, Michelle, if that works.
Yes, please.
So many cultures celebrate this season, which is generally considered to be the last of the harvest seasons. And Samhain arises from arises from a Celtic practice that began about 12,000 years ago, or was at least already being practiced 12,000 years ago. The Celtic year is delineated between light and dark, and it's also divided into 8 Sabbats, and each one of the Sabbats are observances of some part of the changing season, and they also mark the beginning and the end and the midpoints of the year. And then this is depicted, literally depicted, on a wheel, a turning wheel called the Wheel of the Year. And the Wheel of the Year not only shows the placements for these Sabbats, but it also indicates the cyclical changes that we all go through: birth, maturation, decline, death, and if you believe in it, rebirth. Okay. And I do, so we'll just take it from that premise. There are lesser and greater Sabbats. 4 of them are astrologically based and centered around equinoxes and solstice. The other 4, which are generally considered to be the greater Sabbats, are fire festivals, and they're associated with, they're agriculturally based. So, as I said, this particular one, Samhain, is one of the greater ones, and it has managed to continue to be popular outside of the realm of Wiccan practitioners or neo-pagan faiths, and is practiced now largely in the form of Halloween, consciously or unconsciously. So any questions about that before I plow forward?
Yeah, well, as I'm thinking about that, one of the things that I think is so interesting about this particular festival or time of the year is, when I think about it both as being sort of Celtic or pagan, but then I also think about it like in Dia de los Muertos, like from a Latino culture, right? And so I think that's one of the things that I find so interesting about this holiday is that it really seems to span a lot of different cultures globally. Uh,
Yeah.
and yeah, I'm just kind of wondering about your thoughts and comments about that.
Well, there is a real attachment to the season, and I'll talk a little bit more about the history of the Celtic version of this, but absolutely. Um, the idea of this is the third, we're now fully into the third harvest season. Okay.
Okay.
And in Wicca, there's 3, but in almost all cultures, there were at least 2 gatherings of from gardens, to agricultural gatherings that were put up and then celebrated. But this is the final one. This is the last one. The Day of the Dead correlates to the Catholic Church All Saints Day. And we'll talk a little bit more about All Saints Day in a minute. But yes, absolutely. And also, this is considered to be now, if you're Wiccan, we have entered into our new year. This is the Celtic New Year. And that is also true in the Jewish faith. So
Right.
there are cross connections and there are reasons for those. And one of the reasons is that it speaks to us as human beings and as souls. We're connected to nature. We cannot be severed from that connection, whether we choose to be or not. And we're connected to traditions. And those traditions bind us as cultures and as human beings to nature and to one another. So Samhain actually means summer's end, and it's situated between the autumn equinox, which is called Mabon, and Yule. It is, as I mentioned, the third harvest season on the wheel of the year, and it marks the beginning of the Celtic New Year. It's associated with the time when the goddess, who throughout the year has gone through various stages of maturation. She's been the maiden, the mother, and the crone. Now she's the crone. She's the witch that you now see pictured, at Halloween, the unattractive one. But in the Celtic faith, that was a revered figure. And she's reached her cronage, and her consort has also matured during the course of the year, and he has now died. So at Samhain, he dies, and then the next 6 weeks, she is in mourning for him. And then at Yule, which is the time of the winter solstice, he's born again. So you can also see then that connection to the Christian faith, that tie-in.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Very interesting.
Yeah. And so she is actually, there's a very popular image of her stirring her cauldron that has made its way down into, modern symbolism. And it is both a deviation and a distortion of the Celtic belief. Because again, she's usually depicted as something old and ugly. And in truth, she was revered in the Celtic faith. But her cauldron is just as important as she is, and it represents the cauldron of life. It represents life, death, rebirth, and reincarnation. And as she's stirring it, she's sitting there stirring it, she's stirring her consort back into life again. Okay, so it's very powerful imagery, and it was also very powerful imagery for the European witches, and I guess the American ones too, who practiced, because there were very few things that you could have in your home that wouldn't identify you as a witch and could get you in trouble, could get you reported for practicing witchcraft. And so the cauldron was used in the kitchen, so it was safe. There was no way to label you as a witch just for having a cauldron. But it is a symbol of importance to those of us who practice it, and a power symbol, for sure. So at Samhain, the veil between the living and dead is said to be at its thinnest, and that's a concept that has obviously come down through time, and is still believed. And this was a time when we could be in communication with our loved ones and ancestors more easily. Not that you couldn't do that any day of the week if you knew how to open to that experience. But this was said to be the easiest time to do that. And it was also a time to celebrate them, to remember them, and to call upon them for their guidance. So any questions about that before I start switching into the connection between Samhain and then our modern day practices?
Well, it does raise a question for me very personally. I had my last partner died on Halloween. Is
Wow.
that meaningful in any way?
Well, I mean, I'm sure it's deeply meaningful for you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's just kind of interesting to me. Like, it makes it easy to remember.
Well, but in your case, then obviously, if this is something you feel comfortable doing, that makes it even simpler. I'm not saying that you're not in communication with your partner anyway, your late partner, but that makes it an especially magnificent time for you to honor him, to celebrate what you shared together, And if you want to be in communication with them, I mean, that's amazing.
Right, because the veil is particularly thin and there's an additional energetic connection.
And,
Yeah,
yeah, and so when we say veil, we are speaking energetically.
right.
Um, that's amazing. Thank you for sharing that. Bless you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Okay, tell me the next part.
well, so now I'm just going to get to the part explaining how the Celtic connection and how it morphed into what we do now. So, or what many people do now. So the Celts believed that the thinning of the veil allowed for the possibility of this communication with their loved ones, but they also believed that it allowed for the crossing over of wicked fairies and ghosts and those spirits that live outside of our physical world that did not have their best interests at heart. So
Mhm.
after they gathered in the remains of their third harvest, they would celebrate, but they would also burn fires, sacrifice some livestock, light jack-o'-lanterns, and were disguises to ward off any evil intent that those who might slip through the veil and not have their best interests at mind, um, you know, so that they could protect themselves from that. Also, at that time, the custom of bobbing for apples became popular because of the it's a symbol of reincarnation, and the Celtic people did believe in reincarnation, and Wiccan people in particular believe in reincarnation. It was also a time to play pranks and practice divination. The pranks once again were devised to keep any ill intent coming your way
Oh,
diluted, diverted. So at some point, and I think everybody knows this, the Catholic Church co-opted all the Sabbats and turned them into saints' days in an effort to convert the pagans. And they were in many ways successful. In 1609, Pope Boniface IV declared November the 1st All Saints' Day in the hope of just putting the kibosh on the practices and rituals that everybody was doing at Samhain. Um, but for this particular, it did not work, and the attachment to Samhain and the pleasure from it, the meaning of it, was so deep that despite the church's efforts to demonize it, they failed. And so they decided to kind of allow a sanitized version of it, even among Catholics. So the church did eventually acquiesce, renaming Samhain All Hallows Eve, and then that eventually morphed into Halloween, and allowing for the continuation of bonfires, otherworldly costumes, playing pranks, sharing food, and the sharing food part also extended to giving food offerings to the poor, as well as our Passover ancestors. So, any questions about any of that?
no, but I love it. I love it. And I don't know, for a long time I've always found it really fascinating how, the Catholics leaned on the Catholics leaned on the Saturnalia when they decided to come up with when to celebrate Christmas. And, like everybody kind of leaned on everybody else's practices and holidays. And
Yes.
I
And
it's just it's created an interesting fabric in our parties and our belief systems.
well, and I think it's with the exception of maybe May Day, which some
Mm,
people still celebrate to some extent. This one is the one that has held fast the longest, and
yeah.
it speaks to our fascination, our realization that we don't live in physical form forever, that we have souls that go somewhere after we pass. We have loved ones that have gone there. And it also gives us an opportunity to just be somebody else for that day if we want.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I think part of the appeal maybe is that, this is the season of fire. Like who doesn't love, a nice
Right,
bonfire on a cold
right.
night? And to me, Halloween more so than many of the other holidays of the year is about kids, right? And about playing
Absolutely.
pranks and about,
And
sort
getting
of
to eat.
celebrating that learning good and bad kind of thing,
Yes, and getting to eat candy unabated. That
Yeah.
was always on the top of my list.
Yes. So I'm going to remind all of our listeners that you are listening to Mind Power Meets Mystic with me, Michelle Walters. My co-host Cynthia Varkevisser is off today. I am talking to Eloise Hill about Wiccan practices and Samhain. And I wanted to remind everyone that we are still in the middle of running our contest. Cynthia and I have a new offering. It's a 1 hour Zoom call that we do with our guest. The first 30 minutes are a reading with Cynthia. The second 30 minutes is a hypnosis session with me. You can win one or purchase one if you don't happen to win. And all you have to do is look in the show notes for today's episode, make us a review, submit it through the form, and you'll be entered to win. So we would love to see if you want to be our winner. And possibly, if you have a good experience with it, join us on the podcast later to talk about it. So we're going to come back now to talking with Eloise about Samhain or Samhain. And Eloise, I was wondering if you could share with our listeners maybe 3 ways that they can celebrate the holiday in a way that is sort of fitting with the ancient traditions. Because, like, I mean, I guess we all know about jack-o'-lanterns and candy, but um,
Right, right.
making it a little bit more spiritual. What are your thoughts?
There are umpteen things that people can practice this time of year as we move into the darker part of the year. For those of us that practice Wicca and those of us who just practice self-awareness, this is the time of year to really begin to slow down a little bit, turn inward a little bit more. So I strongly suggest meditation. If you've fallen out of the habit, we all get busy, spring and summer. If you've fallen out of the habit of meditating, this is an excellent time to fall back into it.
Fall back into it.
Yes, falling back into it. This is an excellent time to, give yourself permission to reassess. How did the last season go? What goals did I meet? What do I need to release? Three of the big themes for this time of the year, the darker half of the year, is slow down, relax, turn inward, and do some self-exploration in whatever form feels comfortable for you. And meditation is a really easy way to do that, whether you do a guided meditation or you do one that you've customized for yourself. The second thing that comes to mind for me, because it's one of the tools that I've used for my own self-exploration, and also use frequently when I'm doing readings for people during sessions, is if there's a particular tarot card deck, or any kind of oracle deck that you're attached to, this is a great time to get it out and do a layout. And I'm going to just offer you a suggestion here for a 6-card layout that you can do at Samhain. Really, really easy stuff. So 6 cards, the first one, the question associated with it would be, what do I embrace now? The second one would be, what do I need to let go of? The third question you might want to ask is, where in life have I shown up as being brave? Because we need to remember to give ourselves a pat on the back for that sometimes. And then number 4, this is always a big one for me. What fears could I get better at negotiating? Number 5, what do I love to celebrate about this time of year? What's meaningful to me about it? And finally, just a general inquiry into what is it best for me to be what aspect of my life is it best for me to be reflecting on at this time.
I love it. I love it. You do lots of tarot card reading, and I really thank you, and our listeners thank you for giving us such a great tip.
Oh,
And preview, I think from talking to Eloise before we turned on the record button, Eloise has a special invocation to share now with all of us.
All right. So this is called a Samhain blessing for the ancestors. To those whose feet are stilled and those who laugh with us no more, to you we say, our love was with you here and goes with you now to that place where you rest and take delight. May your feet walk along the coffin paths to that place where all is fresh and green, where lovers, friends, and ancestors wait with open arms to greet you. Go in peace and with our blessings, or remain a while this eve with us, the living and life and hearth and love. Be rested amongst your own this eve, this one night, this Samhain. With countless turns of the wheel, we miss you. Be near us this eve. We pray ever for you. And we will meet again once more when the wheel turns for us. Pray, be there to greet us in that place. We will walk the coffin paths together and bide a while with kin and hearth until that time be near us, our kinsmen, our guardians, our ancestors, our beloved dead.
That's incredibly beautiful. Thank you for sharing that.
You are welcome. And if anybody would like a copy of it, just feel free to reach out to Michelle or to me. I believe that my email address
Yep, we'll get your contact
easily
information in
locatable.
there. Yes, yes. So Eloise, thank you so much for being on our show today. What do you have coming up? What would you like to share with our listeners?
Well, I do a Wicca 101 course that involves 4 different hour-long classes, and you can either take the entire course or you can take just a specific class. Currently, for my Samhain special, I'm doing each single class for $35, and that's a $10 discount from what I would normally do. Or the entire course, which is 4 classes, basically learning the basics of the craft, learning about the sabbats, learning about effective ritual, and candle magic, which is the simplest form of effective ritual. And I'm offering that until November the 1st at $100, which is about a $40 savings.
Wonderful. Okay, make sure I get the links for that, and I will put them in our show notes so that our listeners can reach out to you and book directly. Sounds like a wonderful class. Thank you so much, Eloise, for being on our show today, and happy Samhain.
And blessed Samhain to you as well. You and yours.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.